Hello there and welcome to the walk-in. Please drop a subscribe, that would be lovely. Today we're just going to give a quick brief overview of the MI5 chief's speech this week. Kind of does an annual talk at the moment, more or less. We will be going into detail about the Chinese spy case in another video and some other things too, but this is kind of an overview of what's going on. So just going to go through this BBC article. It covers most of it here. There's a picture of Thames House, of course, with a little police patrol outside. So what the chief is saying, so Ken McCallum is saying that MI5 are contending with a near record volume of terror investigations and fast rising state terror threats. So you can think of things like the recent seemingly Islamic terror attack on the synagogue in Manchester. Apparently it's been about 50-50 with far-right extremism and jihadi extremism in the UK. But state terrorism, of course, is when a country, i.e. Russia, China, Iran, are sponsoring people to do things in this country against the British state or people. Or, of course, online espionage, cyber attacks, this kind of thing. We have seen a spate of attacks on big companies like M&S and Sainsbury's and probably the NHS, so probably a lot more that we're currently not being told about. We've seen a few arsons happen in the country at certain warehouses, seem to be sort of pro-Ukrainian warehouses, so we can try and guess what state that might be. There was all these bomb scares last year as well, which I haven't heard a lot about. But yeah, Russia are actively trying to recruit people online, apparently, as well, promising people money to do little things for them. And apparently, a lot of the time when it comes to payday, they're ghosted, there's no payment. And of course, if those people get arrested, they're not going to be protected by the Russian state. It might not be Russian citizens, it could be Bulgarian, Romanian, could be English. But yeah, whatever promises they're given, that it's not going to be withheld. They're just kind of used as completely disposable people. And that follows, of course, from the expulsion of a lot of Russian diplomats, i.e. intelligence officers, across Europe following the war in Ukraine. But he's saying that state terrorism is basically on the rise by about 35%. Chinese state actors in particular present a daily national security threat to the UK, revealing that MI5 had intervened operationally to disrupt Chinese activity of national security concern in the past week. Obviously, there is that spy case that collapsed as well. We are going to go into that into more detail in another video. He did express his frustration over that one. And obviously, they'd worked hard to disrupt a network or disrupt an operation. Ideally, you want a prosecution to be a deterrent, but they're not in control of that. There's been accusations of government interference to protect trade deals and all that stuff, which has been denied, in fairness, by the Prime Minister as well. So we will get into that a little deeper, I think, in another video this week. So yeah, obviously he opened the attack by expressing his deepest sympathies about the synagogue attack in Manchester. Talked a little bit about kind of jihadi Islamic terrorism, and in an interview he actually said, look, we don't know. We know that the counter-terror police found, at least from the attacker's point of view, he's saying, yeah, he's aligned with certain terror groups, but they need to investigate this fully, right? Certainly had the seeds of that ideology, at least as part motivation anyway. It does seem to be seen. I mean, the BBC is saying here he seemed uncomfortable answering the question about China. I don't think he seemed uncomfortable. I think he's obviously speaking carefully because they work for the government essentially, but I think he is ultimately unhappy that there was no prosecution, as the police would be. But listen, cases can collapse for all sorts of reasons. We don't know it was government interference. It could be all kinds of stuff, but it is a bit fishy timing, I'll have to admit with you there. Yeah, so it says here, perhaps the closest Ken got to revealing where he and the agency stood on the matter was his assertion that in relation to China, he was MI5 born and bred and would never back off from confronting threats to the UK, wherever they might come from. Born and bred, don't know much about his background, actually. Any of his relatives in MI5, it's not unusual, it really isn't. And he did say it's frustrated when opportunities to prosecute the national security threatening activity are not followed through for whatever reason. So he's being kind of general, but saying, hey, yeah, look, it's not ideal. But he keeps talking about this new era and threats from AI as well, but also how AI is helping the British intelligence services, hinting that already using it to disrupt plots by, for instance, filtering lots and lots of text messages and network messages between people. So it's going to be very good and very fast at that kind of thing. Of course, in the past, they're probably using scripts and all the rest of it. But if you've got kind of an in-house AI as well, it's going to be a little faster, a little smarter, you would hope. But he does seem to be speaking quite positively about AI, but also negatively, in that obviously it can be used in cyber attacks and many, many other crimes as well. Building bombs and things like that. If you train your own model, you can essentially get it to teach you whatever you like. He also did say that 1 in 5 of the 232 terrorism arrests last year were of children under 17. And this takes me up to an interview I saw with a current counter-terror policeman, senior guy at Scotland Yard, who did say that, there were about 50 odd. When he's saying 1 in 5, it makes it about right, 40 or 50 under 17. Some children as young as 8, or maybe 12, and this is young people in both far right and jihadi extremism as well. So it's kind of worrying. You don't know what to extent. Is that sending a Snapchat saying I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but 13, 15-year-old kids have been recruited here in the past for organisations like ISIS. And on Iran, he said MI5 had tracked more than 20 potential lethal Iran-backed plots in the last 12 months. We saw those arrests in the north of England in the last couple of months, of course. I'm sure we'll hear more at trial for that, but these things tend to go quiet for a time. But I believe that at least some of those people were Iranian as well. So it's kind of this Iranian, Russia, China threat, as well as obviously terror organizations, which are kind of global, right? So he is also talking about the new intervention centre of expertise will be housed within London's Counter-Terrorism Operations Centre. I'm not sure if that's based at Scotland Yard. I actually have to look into that. Where threats involving adolescents' mental ill health and other complex risks would be managed. I think he was saying when it's just MI5 and the counter-terror police going into this, I guess it means like radicalising disenfranchised youths on Discord, Telegram, that kind of thing. You look in America with the Charlie Kirk shooting, there's a potential for, these kind of online things to be, if not radicalised, and then allow a space for this to grow. But maybe they're just trying to create this new centre that's kind of multi-agency that can direct specifically at that issue. People being recruited and groomed online, essentially. And this has been happening pretty much since the dawn of social media, right? Twitter came out in 2011. By 2014, 2015, ISIS were recruiting through. I remember when they had an official Twitter account and were putting out quite well-produced media in the 2010s. But obviously, the more apps you get, the harder it is to control, and more encrypted apps there are, and there's just 1,000 ways for people to recruit particularly vulnerable and mentally ill people online as well. And you can just essentially convince them to do something for you, which is how a lot of this tends to work. And then, you close by thanking the talentless, selfless, and often courageous MI5 people, the work they do behind the scenes. Because a lot of this stuff never comes to light. You might hear stuff mentioned. These 20 plots, you're probably never going to hear about it. I only think they really release things to the public when they need to, or if there's a public trial. So, that's just an overview of what he went through there. And it might be worth doing some videos on some individual things. Like I said, I think the China spy case is really interesting. So I'll do a separate video on that this week. But apart from that, I think that's it for now. So The Walk In, here we are. And please give us a subscribe. Thank you.